So, beginning with your spine upright, as per usual. And we're just going to do a little bit of a recap of the practice from the last session, tiny little bit, just to start us off, and then we'll move into looking at a new condition. So initially, just allowing the body to breathe in and out through the nose. Lightly close the eyes. Hands wherever you like, doesn't matter. Knees, lap, or if you're a slob like me, just kind of draped over your legs, which you should probably be neater than I am, but whatever you want. Just allow the body to breathe in and out through the nose, settle in, and I'll guide you through our practice, just for a little while, not for too long. Just allow everything to settle, let the breath become smooth. Let any activity in the mind just fade away. And just settle into your practice. Then, when you're ready, switch to reverse breathing. So breathing in like we did before. Close that abdominal cavity in a three-dimensional fashion, like a sphere getting slightly smaller. Then breathe out, just let it relax. So just for a few minutes, just setting up the reverse breathing pattern. we're just going to start bringing the awareness to the skin all over the body. So just letting your mind rest on the shape of the form. So soak it into the skin all over, front and back of the body if you can, upper and lower. Just breathe while stabilizing the mind here. Then we want to connect the sensation, the movement at the level of the skin with the dantian and the breathing. So as I breathe in, I'm looking to listen to that drawing in from the surface towards the dantian, shrink wrapping or vacuum packing. As I breathe in, then as I breathe out, just relax. So every in-breath, slowly inhale. Time to draw the whole form closed, form of the body. Then, if you need to bring the hands to the diaphragm, that's okay if it helps you to send the qi. But some of you that are more familiar with these practices can just let the hands rest in the lap, or like I do, in a lazy fashion, whatever you prefer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the breath to breathing in through the nose. As I breathe out, direct that breath down inside, common alchemical technique, towards the seat of the jing. So I breathe in through the nose, breathe out through the nose, and direct the breath down, like blowing on the embers of a dying fire. Okay, just a couple more minutes. Just trying to get the strength of that breath correct, so it's not too stimulating to the Jing, but just a little nourishing for the base of the body. Some people may wish to step back in strength if it excites the Jing. Okay, then just start to breathe normally. Nice deep breaths. As you're doing so, just gently start to mobilize the body a little bit. Doesn't matter how, just move it a little. Shoulders, ribs, spine. Okay. Rub the hands, massage the kidneys. Then eyes. Just rock the neck side to side. Okay, so just want to recap that. Now we should move on to another one, and next of our conditions to look at. Actually, I'll change the screen again a little bit. Give me 1 second. So we're going to look at the next of our conditions, which is the rather fabulously named walking fire to invite demons. 走火入魔. There's different ways to translate it, but essentially that's what it comes down to. So walking the fire to invite the demons. Actually, I did a quick check online out of curiosity. I'm always curious. I don't tend to use the internet for research for what I do, because essentially I was I tend to stick with the things I was taught in person as much as anything. But I did a quick check to see what people think of Qi deviations and looked online. And funny enough, the vast majority of the stuff I found in forums was actually derived from the stuff I'd written in some books. So it seems like it's spreading, which is kind of useful actually. I'm quite happy about that. It seems like it's going out there. But I did find a reference to walking fire, entering demons, with the slight error, it was even on Wikipedia, which surprised me, that it's they used it generically. So they accidentally seem to have made the error that think it's a generic term for all Qi deviations, but that's not true actually. It's for a particular type of Qi deviation. So I just wanted to correct that. So the sources you find on the internet, some of it's not quite right. Walking fire, entering demons is a rather grandiosely named result of essentially usually slightly overly forceful practice generally, usually, but there's other couple of reasons why it can happen as well. And it kind of got known as a phrase. I could be wrong on this, but I think it came during the Qigong fever era of China, which is a stage in Chinese history not that long ago. When's Qigong fever? Anyone better the dates than me? Was that the 90s, 80s? I'm not sure. It's kind of recent era, isn't it? Someone with a better history than me will know. 90s, okay, thank you, Bernard. Yeah, it was somewhere around there. I knew I was in the ballpark here. It was in my lifetime anyway. So the Qigong fever basically was Qigong became very trendy, very fashionable, and kind of spread. A lot of people were practicing it. And it's not really doing it justice to talk about it that simply, but it was a big deal. And obviously Falun Gong, if you know what that group is, and Li Hongzhi's teachings kind of, he clashed a little bit for various reasons with the powers that be in China, and that kind of was one of the causative factors for kind of the end of the Qigong fever, this kind of spread of Qigong in China. And I think it's safe to say it moved across to kind of state-sponsored, regulated Qigong in China largely after that, and that's when you start to get those kind of governing body recognized systems of Qigong, like the Animal Frolics or the Baduan Jin or something that became very standardized. So during that era, I believe that's when the phrase walking fire, entering demons became popularized. It was probably discussed before that anyway, but it kind of as a phrase, it started to be mentioned. And I think I could be wrong again. Chinese history, not my recent Chinese history, not my strongest point. Ancient Chinese history, I'm not too bad at, but recent Chinese history, I might be a little bit off, but I do believe that they actually set up hospitals to treat specifically this condition in certain areas. I did meet a couple of the doctors from Shandong province when I was there that had worked in one of the clinics that specialized in this. And this was the main syndrome that they had been treating, more so than poison fire effect in the heart or Tupian, essentially a reversal, a deviation. They were focused more on this. So what they were using was a lot of Chinese medical protocols using a combination of herbs, strange herbs actually, weird formula they were using, kind of weird logic in the way they were doing it, but clearly it worked. They've been using a lot. Herbal formula, acupuncture, and qi emission using specific hand techniques in the regions of the body to treat this condition, along with breathwork exercises and also psychological evaluations as well alongside this to try to treat the condition. So the reason I'm telling you all that is to show you that actually at some point in Chinese history, recent Chinese history, it was such an issue that they actually had to tackle it. Now the question is whether it was kind of propagandized. I don't even know if that's a word, you know what I mean? Like kind of the Chinese government, as all governments do. I don't want to pick on the Chinese government. I think all government, I think we all know now, all governments do it. Censor things and also exaggerate things in order to push forward a political agenda. And of course, at the time, Qigong wasn't very popular. So I have a feeling they made out that walking fire, entering demons was a much bigger deal than it really was. But still, it's a condition that you see. So essentially, the walking fire, what they mean walking kind of implies doing. So you are doing something that generates fire, generates heat in the body, but it's a little different just from the heat that's rising up within, and we'll look at why. It's a different type of heat. And then inviting or entering, you're inviting in demons. And the demons is not literal. We're not really talking about possession as such, although sometimes that's lumped in with it. But really what they're talking about is psychological breakdowns or a particular type that can occur as a result of this condition. Yeah. So the heat that's generated, this one as well, I should say, that I think, from what I've seen, this is more common in women than it is in males. So there we go. We balance it out from the last lesson, the last lecture. Gender-wise, we are now equal, or two of the genders anyway, we've covered. Yeah. So women are more likely to get walking fire, entering demons. So I have met males that have had it as well, but it's more likely to affect women because it has a close relationship to the blood. Okay. Poison fire affecting the heart is more likely to affect males because of its close connection to the Jing. Now, if you know much about how female and male bodies works, males often struggle with their essence, with their Jing essentially in governing and regulating it. Women struggle with their blood a little bit more than males do, partially because in the premenopausal phase of your life, obviously you've got menstruation, the menstrual cycle, which is going to take its toll upon the blood as well. But post-menopausal as well, there's still a little bit of a drain upon the blood, just simply because of the mechanism behind the way women's bodies process emotions as opposed to males. There are some differences between the two. So consequently, women tend to suffer with conditions that are related to blood issues more easily than males. Yeah. So the heat that is generated in walking fire, well, let's just do the walking fire part first. Let's look at how we generate the fire, or not generate the fire as the case may be. We don't want to, yeah? Essentially, Qi is warm. That's just a fact, okay? So even in Chinese medicine, they say one of the functions of Qi is to warm. It is warming, okay? And there's various functions associated with that. But then the Qi that is generated from internal practice, whether it be Qigong or Neigong or certain meditation systems, or even the equivalency of that in yogic practices, is warm. It is hot. Yeah, it is going to heat up the body. So therefore, and you know why that heat comes, right? Because of the resistance in the body. You have an increased flow of energy through something that has a certain degree of resistance. And if you pass that energy flow, conduct it through something with resistance, the byproduct of that is it produces heat. It's why the nerves heat up, it's why the skin heats up. It's that kind of energy, right? So if the level of energy moving through the body is stronger than the ability for it to conduct without there generating resistance, then more heat is going to be formed. So what should happen through Qigong is through attention rather than intention. Sorry to jump back to my buzzword definition that you're probably sick of hearing about by now. But if the mindset is within that state that has this passive, attentive, stabilized listening, then what will happen is the Qi will build at a rate that is warm, definitely warm. Yeah, you're going to sweat a bit, but the body is going to be able to adapt to deal with this energy that's flowing through the body, especially as it's combined with the exercises of opening and releasing and letting go and creating space in the body so that that resistance is taken out and then it can process the Qi that moves through you. Got that so far? Did I say that too fast? Did I speak too fast, or was that okay? That's all right, is it? Okay. Yeah, so our Qigong process is kind of twofold: opening up, creating space, reducing resistance, and then producing more of that energy naturally that flows through that circuit. So you should stay at a sort of comfortable level of warmth, if you like. Every now and then you step over that mark. If you're a kind of dedicated practitioner, you're going to every now and then, and what do you get? Oh, a little bit of lightheadedness or a bit of palpitation or something, or you just feel really flushed, a bit like a hot flush or something, and nothing to worry about. You walk it off, go chill out, relax, rest, and the body will process it. So every now and then you just kind of step over that mark. But if the Qi is forced or intended in an overly excessive manner, as in you are pushing that Qi or directing that Qi or driving that Qi through that system at a level where it cannot process, the resistance is too great, then it's going to produce more Qi, okay, more energy within the body. Sorry, not more Qi, I apologize, more heat within the body. It's almost like I'm trying to advertise push more so you generate more Qi. That's not what I mean. You generate more heat, more warmth within the body from the resistance, from the tightness. After a while, this will produce two effects. The first of which is a kind of inflammation. And when we use the term inflammation in internal arts, we sort of mean it can be literal if it gets out towards the surface, towards the tissue. But there's almost like an energetic form of inflammation as well, where it produces hyperactivity and growth and development of pathogens in the body. So you get this kind of hyperactivity and inflammation of the qi. But then on top of this, what you also get is it affects the fluids in the body. And this is what differentiate. This is what they missed on Wikipedia, which you can't blame Wikipedia. They've got to fit it into a small section, haven't they? And whatever. But this is what they missed, is the difference between heat rising in the body is so far what I've explained is heat rising in the body. Too much resistance to the energy fuels. Walk in fire, entering demons, walk in fire, it takes it a step further because the heat affects the fluids in the body. And that's the key. That's what transfers it from one to the other. This is why it becomes more of a problem. So the fluids are affected in two key ways. The first is can take your head getting around. Chinese medicine people will understand. And if you don't do Chinese medicine, you'll just have to kind of get your head around this concept. But obviously, when you have heat and fluids, then it can dry up fluids. We understand that. But actually in Chinese medicine, it's a little different because heat can coagulate fluids. It can actually thicken them. It's like the viscosity disappears a little bit. So what will happen is that heat can develop a thicker viscous fluid within the body that we call phlegm. It can build up inside, yeah? So that might sound a bit weird. Phlegm is a big subject in Chinese medicine, but just think of it like that. You've got fluids in the body. There's too much heat that's been generated by this resistance from the forceful practice. The fluids are influenced by the heat and then they kind of thicken and that starts to turn into phlegm, which obstructs circulation in the body. Okay, so far? Got that bit? It's kind of a brief version of Chinese medicine, but it should be okay. So this phlegm is quite curious because phlegm can exist on two different levels in brief. First, it can be substantial, okay, which curiously still means insubstantial, weirdly. But when they say substantial, what they mean is it can obstruct the circulation of qi in the body. So the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to get all kinds of symptoms related to Chinese medicine. So you might get aches or pains in a region of the body. You might get obstruction of the lungs' ability to descend the qi or disperse the fluids or whatever, all kinds of things. So you can get random bodily symptoms that appear that don't seem to follow any pattern or anything like this, and it's kind of hard to pinpoint where they're from, but you get these kind of weird aches and pains. So every version of this particular condition, what I'm saying, can manifest on a bodily level in all kinds of different ways first. Yeah, and generally with conditions related to phlegm, they say they are, what are the key words? I forget, but essentially if I paraphrase, good enough for now, if I paraphrase, it's confusing, as in it's difficult to figure out, it's obstinate, it's quite difficult to treat, and it's chronic, it lasts a long time. It's a kind of a complex condition that's hard to treat that builds into the body. There are actually three key words for it in Chinese medicine, but I can't remember them off the top of my head because it's in the classics, but that's essentially what it's implying. Yeah, it's complicated, it's confusing, and it's obstinate, it stays there for a long time. So that's our first bit. We have overly forced the qi. This has generated more heat and resistance, essentially in the nervous system, isn't it? It's starting to build up, which then starts to generate heat first. The normal heat signs, headaches, flush face, pressure, sweaty, whatever, palpitations, all the stuff we would associate with that. That can then coagulate the fluids within the body to generate obstructions with substantial phlegm. Then you get the insubstantial version of phlegm, which obstructs the mind. It obstructs the mind. So this is the start of inviting the demons. So essentially the heat has now started to prevent clear thinking, and this is going to start to lead to the next stage of our condition. With me so far? That easy enough? If that's confusing, what I'll do is if you can't follow that, I'll draw a little flowchart for it later and I'll take a photo and stick it in the Facebook group if it helps you as well, just to show you a flowchart of how it develops if you don't have that kind of brain that can kind of picture that out. So the other thing this heat does is it affects the blood. It affects the blood because qi and blood have a relationship to one another. They flow together. So this is why it tends to be a little bit more common in women, because often in women, the blood is a little bit weaker. It doesn't tend to be as strong as it is in males anyway. That's okay, you counter it with having a better jing, better essence generally. So the blood is a little bit weak. So the blood starts to dry up. Excuse me, just going to drink this. the blood starts to dry up and it becomes deficient. You get blood deficiency symptoms as well. One of the symptoms of blood deficiency, there's plenty, but one of them is that the blood no longer anchors the Shen either. So what it starts to do is it creates a more anxiety within the mind. Yeah, so that anxiety starts to come first. So we're starting to already have confusion and a lack of connection to reality, and then we start to get anxiety combined with it. The two start to sort of intermingle, and this is where the demons enter. So before we look at what the demons are and how they manifest, you can already see that there are different gradations of this. So I would say the earliest stage of it is just, I guess, what in New Age circles, or sort of not even New Age circles, just general terminology, we might call ungroundedness or something, a lack of groundedness, which I know that's a woolly term, but I think we all know what that means, right? Somebody who's a little bit away with the fairies up in the clouds tends to come first. That's the first stage of it. So there's a lack of connection to anything. So if I think about kind of almost every internal art scene I've been in, apart from martial arts, but all the kind of cultivation arts, there's quite often been a few people that have kind of been on the spectrum of this. You know, they're already kind of in that place. They're away with the fairies. And I have to say, most of the time it's women. The vast majority of the time it is women, because the blood tends to be a little bit weaker. So it sounds a bit strange, but the strength of blood in men tends to ground them a little bit more. That doesn't mean men can't get this. They certainly can. And I've seen ungrounded males, but it's definitely a higher percentage of women within these particular arts. Hope that's not offensive to say. It's just what I've seen. Women can be a bit sensitive sometimes, which is also offensive to say, isn't it? I'm not sure, but it's just from what I've seen within these circles. So after the ungroundedness, that kind of space cadetness away with the fairies, what starts to come is anxiety attacks next, panic attacks. And sometimes what will happen is it will just be like a loss of breath and, you know, sort of breath gets high and a standard kind of panic attack. And then the second stage is if that panic attack is combined with the unrootedness, that can be a little bit problematic, because now there's a lack of insight into the nature of what's going on. And that's key, right? That's something that's often missed in Chinese medicine as well. If there is a lack of rootedness, there is a lack of insight. So if you have insight, you might have a panic attack and you go, oh, I'm having a panic attack, or I have anxiety, so I'm experiencing some anxiety. But if you have a lack of insight, what will happen is you'll go, oh, I'm having anxiety, it's because there's a psychic attack on me. Or I'm experiencing anxiety, it's because Mercury's in retrograde, or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, it's always some kind of excuse or reason or a transference of why you're having that kind of experience over to something else. It's always an outside cause, it's an outside effect, which, funnily enough, if you just give them some herbs or some food to anchor the blood, most of those symptoms go away, which is curious, because you would have thought Mercury was strong enough to overcome the heavy food, wouldn't you, if it was that big an influence? But there you go. So, not that I'm saying the planets don't influence you, because of course they do, but you get what I'm saying. I'm saying that there is an external agent that it becomes blamed on. Now that's important, because the demons that they're talking about are an externalized agent to take the blame for the condition. That's the point, right? That's essentially what the condition is. That's essentially what the illness is kind of characterized by, an external agent to blame it upon. Okay so far? Do you follow that? Did I say all that too fast? I think I maybe said that too quick. Or are you okay? Is that all right, is it? Okay, cool. Yeah, I don't know. It's difficult when you're trying to, especially when I don't have feedback because you're not here, if you're trying to explain a condition, how it unfolds, in your head it just kind of unravels, but you don't know how clear it is when you're trying to explain it. Sometimes it's easier if you've got a whiteboard, you can kind of map it out or whatever, but I didn't think ahead. So the demons I'm talking about, this is how they now manifest, because First of all, what will happen inside someone's head is you always have different emotional aspects to your nature, don't you? We could almost kind of divide the mind up and go, sometimes you have an angry part, a filter that you view things through. Sometimes you might have a, whatever, I don't know, a happy, altruistic aspect of your nature. You might have a fearful aspect of your nature. Now, of course, they are the same nature, but they can appear at different times. And if you spend any time around anyone, of course, people are in different emotional or psychological states. And what do we call those? Call them moods, don't we? As much as anything, as far as I can see, if you live with someone, you can say, oh, you're in that mood, or you're in that mood. And essentially a mood, as far as I can see, is just kind of a filter that person is seeing things through at that particular time. Yeah, it just depends which of their emotional memories or reference points are kind of at the front of their mind. But all of us know that these are a part of what makes us up as much as anything. But if one is particularly strong or particularly stressful or particularly difficult, then what can happen is it can fragment, it can start to separate from the others. So that will start with like very strong moods, almost to like a, bipolar's not the word, is it? Again, maybe one of you guys knows the word. There's a, not like schizophrenic break, it's less than that. But some people have a very, like a switch, don't they, in their nature? Like a good side and a bad side. You've ever know, I'm sure you've got those people in your life, your friends or family or something, that one day they're this person, and then you see them another time and they're a completely different person. You know what I mean? Just the mood is so strong. I'm not talking about sort of mental illness level, but just a different kind of mood. You can sometimes see that darkness kind of come over them sometimes, and you see them and you're like, oh yeah, they're in that. Oh, do you know what? I'll visit you tomorrow instead. I'll come back tomorrow. You just relax today. And that kind of phase will come over people. Now, the problem is that if you have a lot of heat within the body, a lot of heat. Oh, someone's given me the word there. Is that the word somebody gave me?
Borderliness?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. There's a word. I can't remember. It doesn't matter.
It's a question before that as well.
I'll take it after. It's been a long time. I did psychology at university years ago, but it's been a long time. I can't even remember. But essentially, and I didn't listen anyway, let's be honest. I was only there occasionally. My attendance wasn't awesome. So, where are we up? Yes. So what happens is if there's that divide in the nature, then if there's a lot of heat within the body moving through the nervous system, then what it can start to do is it can start to fuel that emotional experience, and then it gets to the stage where it snaps and it takes on an identity of its own. That fire will create a separate identity. So what will happen is, as an easy example, say I've got a very angry side, very out of control. I've got anger problems and I need counselling or something like that. I've got that side to my nature. And I'll switch into that mode and out of that mode. But what happens is when I switch into that mode and it's combined with that fuel from the fire, then in order to kind of defend myself from it, it'll separate. And then what will happen is I'll start to actually identify it as something different. Okay, and I've seen people do this quite clearly with this kind of condition. And then when they identify it as something else, that's not their mood, that's a separate person. Do you understand that? They think about it as if it's something else. When it's combined with the lack of reality, plus the desire to blame something on an external agent, then what they'll start to do is assume they are possessed, or assume that they have a demon in them, or assume there's a psychic attack, or that somebody else has entered into their head. And they can get to a stage where they even have conversations with this other sort of entity that they've generated within their mind. They'll talk about it like it's a separate thing. Does that make sense? You understand that? And that is the demon that has entered or been invited by the fire that is being generated within the body. The vast majority of possessions are this. That's what the vast majority of possessions are. People are normally possessed by themselves. They are possessed by an aspect of their nature that is so unpleasant to deal with that psychologically they've had to kind of snap it off and give it an identity of its own. And what will happen, and you can see why, right? It's almost like it's a defense mechanism, because you don't want to accept that part of you is so strong, and you don't really want it to be in charge all the time. So it kind of severs so that you don't have to kind of accept the nature of it, okay? The acceptance is not there, it's too hard. So therefore you identify it as an outside cause. And then it's easy because you can, I don't want to say shift the blame in a negative way, because we talk about shifting the blame almost. When you say someone shifts the blame, that's quite accusational, isn't it, to say that about somebody? But actually, I mean, sometimes something is so difficult to accept that you have to shift the blame onto something else. You have to attribute it to something else as a kind of psychological defense mechanism. So I think that in these cases, I think empathy rather than kind of looking down on somebody for doing this is wise, because it can be difficult to deal with these sides of your nature. But that's what will happen, is the blame or whatever, the responsibility for the condition gets shifted onto this external entity. And then more heat generated in the body will continue to fuel this division. Sometimes people will have one, sometimes they'll have multiple. Yeah, they'll have one, they'll have multiple. So, I've seen people talk about these in different ways, and I've seen people talk about these as their demons or their devils. I've seen them talk about them as their angels. This is my angel that's here as well, that watches over me. I've seen people talk about this as this is a psychic attack someone is doing on me. I've had people talk about this is my psychic teacher coming and invading my head and doing these things and teaching me these things, those kind of things. Or I've seen it as, I've even known it with students thinking other students are doing psychic attacks on each other, which really hasn't been the case. And there's been some complex conversations there to try to sort of clear that up. It's quite amazing the kind of strange stories that are generated within the mind. But let's look at, missed it. So let's look at the kind of the mechanics of it again, right? What do you have with walking fire, entering demons? You have excess heat. So what's that? Agitation and excitement. Yeah. You have phlegm causing obstructions and also mental confusion, because that's what it does, mental confusion. You have a division within the various parts of your acquired mind that's been given a separate identity. And then you also have the lack of insight, lack of clarity, and the unrootedness that comes from the weakness in the blood. Yeah, and when all of those are combined, that's why it starts to generate that kind of issue. I'll take some questions a second, because yes, yeah, they can, auditory or visual. Yeah, I don't know about olfactory, I'm not sure, but auditory and visual hallucinations, yes, for sure, yeah, yep. Jackson saying multiple personality disorder or borderline personality disorder, both very loaded and potentially misused concepts. Yeah, I mean, the distinctions and the definitions are tricky, aren't they? I think part of the problem when you have an actual label for something is it almost kind of eradicates the fact that there's a gradient of it. To me, once something a label, you assume it's all of the same severity, which I think is a part of the problem, which is why I'm not too much of a fan of labels in general, even the kind of walking fire, entering demons. I mean, it sounds terrifying, right? But it can also be for somebody that's just become a little bit disconnected from reality and become a space cadet on a sort of lesser level. So, you know, I would fall under that category sometimes, I think. Paranoid schizophrenic, I might fall under that category as well. Someone's listed there, I'm not sure. Tanya says projection onto perceived others fall under this too. Sorry, that. Maybe, but yeah, generally with regards to this condition, they're specifically talking about the demons that are in your head, which sounds terrifying again, doesn't it? The ones you've generated rather than onto another person usually. It's normally an internal thing. Chinese call them internal dragons, is the phrase for them. The internal dragons, they call them. The split personalities, projection, yep. Lucia says, can it happen to young people, 11 years plus? Yeah, for sure. Yep. Yeah, definitely. There's no restriction to it, I wouldn't have thought. Julie. I think perceived, not perceived. Not sure what that's referring to. But you're probably right. Maybe I got some words wrong. If I did, I apologise. So, the difficulty with this one, all right, I'll give you some examples. The difficulty with this is that human beings are very capable of... right, okay. Judy was helping me understand. I got it. Thanks, Judy. So the difficulty is that human beings are very capable of looking for correlations to justify something. We're very good at that, aren't we? So what is seemingly an unrelated event to the majority of people, we're very capable of saying this is an event that kind of reinforces what's going on. So even random events in your life and stuff like that can reinforce this story of this ghost or this possessing demon that lives within your head. That's usually what happens. So it becomes very difficult to discuss with somebody on a rational level, because I have been literally in a treatment room talking to someone who believes they are possessed, and then they will, like, I don't know, off the top of my head, a kind of example, like something will, the cushion will get knocked or something, and they'll be like, oh, I saw a cushion knocked 2 weeks ago and the same time, so this must mean the ghost is doing this, or whatever, I don't know. They come up with something better than that, but these ludicrous kind of stories are generated, are created, and you can't talk someone out of that, because then they'll say, well, 20 cushions have fallen over in the last week, or so they'll have some kind of justification for it. It's like a mental story that is being, hello, that's a good noise, isn't it? Don't know what that means. A mental story is being generated in order to kind of reinforce that demon for them. There's also an extra issue, is that what they require with regards to kind of verbal interactions with a teacher is for the teacher to explain to them as best they can, as gently as they can, because it can get a bit hostile sometimes with the reactions you get, is try to kind of get them to understand maybe a little bit of the mechanism that's taking place. So there's a kind of very long conversation usually that needs to happen, where you have to kind of get them to understand maybe this mechanism is here, and then afterwards, if I can just, as a Chinese medical practitioner, just touch on adjusting a couple of those things, like nourishing the blood, like getting some of the heat out of the body, like maybe transforming some of that phlegm and getting the qi circulating a little bit, it'll just lessen the symptoms just enough that you can kind of get your logic in through that kind of chink in their armor, and then you can kind of talk them down and start working with them. So there's a very complex process where you're almost a kind of, I wouldn't say a counselor, you're more of a rationalizer, I suppose, as much as anything, combined with the treatments where you have to work with them after a while to get them down. And once you get them to a stage where everything kind of cools down and chills out, often you can get the kind of those parts of their nature to kind of come together. And of course, what is the tool that does that? There's two of them. One is insight, and the second one is acceptance, because they have to have insight to the fact that this might be a part of their nature, and then acceptance that this is a part of their nature that's not necessarily good or bad, it's just a part of who they are. And that process kind of brings them down from there. But the energetic and the Chinese medical aspect must be that the phlegm must be transformed. If it's there, it will be, trust me, you'll find it. And the heat must be cleared, and whatever else, the blood must often be nourished for that person as well as what other symptoms are there at the same time. Does that make sense so far? Understand that? It's quite an interesting condition, isn't it? I mean, I don't know if you're supposed to find negative things interesting, I'm not sure, or whatever. It feels almost a bit morbid, doesn't it? But I do find the mechanics behind this quite fascinating, that this can unfold for somebody. Not that I mean that in any mean way. It's a horrible thing to be living with, but it is quite interesting that this can happen. Human mind and body connections are very fascinating. We then have the other common problem with it. Talk a little bit more. You okay for a little bit more? Another 10 minutes or something? Is okay? Cool. All right then. So the other problem with it is, for some reason, I'm sure there's like there's a karmic reason or something that does my head in. It really frustrates me as I meet these people sometimes, and I really feel for them, and I'm thinking, right, okay, I've got to help this person. Although I've done so many now that it starts to lose that kind of side of it. But at the beginning, I really felt for these people, and I really want to help with this condition. But they always seem to attract people that make that condition worse. It's like, why does life just cause them to draw those? What? How did you meet that person? I never meet anybody like that. And then because you have that condition, this difficult person comes into their life. And those difficult people are always the same. It's always a spiritualist of some sort that is telling them, yes, I have assessed you, and you have a demon or a devil or a past life problem, or something that is there that just reinforces that story for them. And so many times I've been successfully getting through to them and treating them and getting the symptoms gone, getting the blood nourished, getting them back to earth, they're starting to feel good. And then somebody comes into their life that's telling them exactly the opposite. Like, no, this is an invasion by a demon. And then you've got like a third party that you're almost clashing with to try to bring them back to reality. It always happens. And it's always a middle-aged guy with a ponytail, generally. No, that's mean. Or a man bun. No, it's always a certain kind of person that probably also has, that was mean, I don't mean that, that has a certain degree of walking fire, entering demons themselves. That's usually the case. You generally find at some point they've struggled with their own mental health and often has some kind of control issue where they're benefiting from reinforcing that story for that person. It might not be money, it might not be sex, it might not be power, it might simply be that there is something I'm gaining by drawing that person into my story. Now, the issue with that, of course, is that it constantly then reinforces the problem more and more and more until the person ends up with a psychotic break. And that's generally where it goes. It goes from space cadet, which is fine, like whatever, I find space cadets quite charming, to be perfectly honest, but it goes from there through. For all of my joking at the New Age scene, I actually find New Age people very pleasant company. That I do enjoy their company, and I love those conversations. I do tease them, but I do like them. I find them quite charming people, to be honest. So from that kind of space cadetedness sort of quality, it tends to then go on to anxiety and panic attacks, or maybe sort of mood swings, and lots of fear, through to, okay, now we have a separation of that part of our identity that we're giving its own, we're giving it an identity, we're saying this is an outside thing. Then comes the weird logic that you have to kind of decide where it comes from, and you decide it's a ghost or a possession or a psychic attack of some sort. And then eventually what it ends up is a full psychiatric break where the person just collapses. Now, curiously, if you ever see someone have this complete collapse of their psychiatric health from this kind of condition, like I used to work in a psychiatric unit, a hospital, for a while, and I would see people in various states of psychological distress while I was at university, and it was a sort of work alongside it. And the difference between those guys is when they had their psychological break, they would often get, I would guess, psychosomatic symptoms alongside the breakdown that they had, because they would get aches and pains and weird things all over the body, and sometimes thermal changes. This is kind of people in a psychiatric unit. They would often get coughs, I noticed a lot. I guess is that kind of chi stagnation up here, these kind of symptoms, but always following a certain pattern. But the people that have the walking fire, entering the demons, can get the most bizarre symptoms arise alongside it, probably because of the phlegm creating the weird obstructions. So they can get anything from coughing up masses of fluid that doesn't seem logical. Where's that all from? Or all of a sudden they can like just start urinating crazy amounts or something, like the body is trying to evacuate these fluids out of the systems. Or they can suddenly get like periods where they just drop and go unconscious and faint, and then they're just gone out for half an hour, then they're back. Like really bizarre physical symptoms that come with this because of the obstruction from the phlegm. Now the problem is, a lot of those symptoms look awfully like possession, don't they? Or exorcism. So it's kind of, if you think about the film from the 70s, is that called The Exorcist? Maybe it is, where they're kind of head spinning and she's vomiting, sort of projectile vomiting, those kind of things. It's almost, not the head spinning, but it's almost those kind of physical symptoms. So the problem is that feeds back into that story of I must be possessed. Yeah, when actually it's not, it's just something with the body. So, does that help explain that condition? Do you understand that one, what it is? So it's not a generic thing for Qi deviation, is it? It's quite a specific thing. Like it's very different from poison fire influence in the heart. It's very different from just heat rising in the body. It's very different from a Qi reversal within a channel. It's a very specific thing, a very specific condition. Who's going to get it? I'm not offering it to you. That sounds like sort of handing it out. Which one of you wants a bit of... No, I'm not going to do that. So who's going to get it is going to be, well, within the Qigong world, obviously I said women are more susceptible to it, but that's because of the blood. It's because of the blood. Yeah, because of the blood weakness. But males with weak blood can get it too. They can certainly get it too. It's just that women have more propensity towards blood deficiency a little bit. With regards to men with blood deficiency, it's normally going to be men that are very, very stressed, because stress can deplete the blood, or it's going to be men that don't have a blood-building diet. So I hate to say it, but it's going to be more likely to be vegans and vegetarian males than anything else, because it's difficult, it's not impossible, but it's difficult to sustain the blood on that kind of diet. So first of all, that category of people. Secondly, and also actually women who've had a lot of children, or even children too young, can actually be quite susceptible to as well, because of the deficiencies in the body. So that's another reason women can be susceptible to it as well. It's going to be, in the Qigong world, anybody that uses a lot of imagination, because imagination, well, it's not going to be anybody. A lot of people can use their imagination for years and they're fine. But if they do get a problem, it'll be from strong imagination work. That's one of the key causative factors from it, especially if they're imagining or visualizing deities. That's going to be quite major. This deity is visiting me. That sort of disconnection from reality, combined with an overly forceful intent, is more likely to generate the heat. It's going to be a system that guides the Qi forcefully. So I must lead my Qi to here. It must go up to my brain and down to my perineum, or whatever, wherever they're sending, or I must send it here, I must send it there, leading it with the mind. That is going to generate heat, okay? And in most people, they'll still be okay. But in some people, if they have that deficiency of blood and a tendency toward the heat, then that will start to build that fire, yeah? It can also occur in people from very religious systems. And I don't mean necessarily you go to church on a Sunday or to the mosque or the synagogue or whatever, but I mean systems of energetic practice that are mixed with religious thought. When the two start to be combined, it can be a risk factor, because with regards to religion mixed with it, again, being careful, but I don't know why, because I'm quite a religious person. So therefore, if I'm religious, I'm allowed to slag religions, aren't I? Isn't that the rule? As an English person, I'm allowed to slag the English? I don't know if that's how it works. But part of the weakness with religions ultimately is faith is a powerful tool in many ways, but it's also a very dangerous tool in many ways because it doesn't use discernment. Faith is not normally based on a lot of clarity or discernment. It's almost kind of opposed to it a little bit in some ways, because it's based upon trust and something like this. And this faith-based energy, combined with essentially the picturing or visualization with strong beliefs, combined with the energy work, can then start to generate those symptoms, can generate those problems. It's why I tend to be a little bit down on systems that have that combination of religion and energetics kind of mixed together. So when people try to explain Zhe Gong as spirits entering the body, or your Fu Fa Shan, or whatever they want to call it, starting to teach you as if they're a deity, these are the kind of systems that are more likely to generate these kind of side effects, rather than seeing, oh, my body is moving because the nerves are being stimulated by the electrical charge that's moving through them. If I start to talk about gods and deities and the Yellow Emperor entering me to teach me, you are more likely to generate those kinds of systems, those kind of problems. And there are quite a few of those systems that exist right now. Some of them becoming increasingly popular, so there's going to be more of these issues as time goes on. With regards to meditation, it's going to be people that have been a bit forceful in their meditation, which many people can be a little bit forceful in their meditation, or meditation that is also combined with religious stuff as well. So if that combination is there, that's where the risk factor comes in. With regards to yoga, again, it's going to be anything that is mixed with very strong religious iconography plus energy movement, or something that generates strong fires. Very forceful breathing can generate these kinds of issues as well, because the nature of these fires is they generate that heat. Well, the nature of the breathing is it generates that fire, that heat within the body that can cause those problems. I think those are the main people that get affected by it. Yeah, I think so. I think out of the people I've met, those are the ones, especially if you throw in the extra factor of religion plus energy work plus imagination plus a trauma, a deep trauma from when younger, something problematic, something that's actually really quite difficult and quite scarring on them, such as war or sexual molestation, or I don't know, or someone died very close to them, or something quite sort of deep and scarring in them. That can also be quite a strong causative factor as well, because there's almost like a big divide already within their psychology to a certain extent. Okay, I've talked enough. Let's look at these and then we'll do some practice. Blah, 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 blah. Bernard, so is channeling mostly from this condition, talking... Gonna get me in trouble, Bernard. Is channeling mostly from the condition, talking aspects of yourself? Well, let's counter everything I said, because you can be possessed by a spirit. That is possible. There is a literal possession that is not the same as walking fire, entering demons. I always call that condition wrong. Walk in the fire to invite the demons. That's what I mean. There is a literal type of possession that you can get as well from entities outside the body. But we don't talk about that with people experiencing walking fire to invite the demons, because obviously that's problematic. But they are a very, 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 very small percentage. It's incredibly rare. But we do live... our material realm is not the only realm out there for sure. And then it's the same with channeling. That there are people that can channel. Yes, there are people that can channel, that can act as a conduit for information through their body. That is certainly true. I know a couple of them myself. But the majority of channelers are, yes, actually essentially responding to a divided part of their own nature. Yes, they are. In such a way that I've been to psychics and channelers and watched them communicate with the student or patient, whatever you might call it, client, I suppose is the word, isn't it? If you channel it, I don't know what the word is, but communicated with the person, and in my head, I can 100% say what that channeler is going to say, what that psychic is going to say for that person, because I can just see from the subconscious cues on the person what they're going to say. No, I'm not a channeler, I'm not psychic, but the very fact that I can accurately say what they're going to say means that I can read it off the body. I've even taught courses in places, and obviously on courses you get people from all over and outsiders that I don't really know, and I've watched them interacting for over lunch, channeling and doing psychic readings for people I teach, and they've not been accurate. They've just been, again, just read from subconscious cues. And I think actually the psychic or the channeler doesn't know that. They don't know that. Their information that they're picking up subconscious, they attribute to this divided entity, and then consequently they think it's something else, and then they go through this process. But I never know if I'm supposed to say anything, so I always just go, well, I'm on lunch, I'm off duty, I'll stay quiet. But yeah, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. But then of course there are real channelers. That is true, there are real channelers. There's actually one in Lotus Qigong who's really, really good, actually. He's really good at it. But yeah, there are real channelers that can pass that information through, that's for sure. But even the best channeler is still filtering through their own mind, right? Even the best channeler, say you're the best channeler in the world, you're still filtering through your own mind. So there's still going to be some bias. So everything must always be taken with a pinch of salt. But yeah, very cool if people can do it. I think Bernard was just trying to get me in trouble there. I think that's what he was doing. He's trying to get me, trying to stir. I know your game, Bernard. Jen, is there ever a genetic component? Does TCM talk about a genetic component? Yeah, we do talk about genetics in Chinese medicine. It's linked to particular organs, a particular aspect of your system. Genetic component to something like walking fire, entering demons. I suppose there would be, because of people's predisposition to a particular quality of blood and organs. That's true. Yeah, I wouldn't say it was the main factor though. I was just going through my mind thinking of people I've treated. I wouldn't say it was the main factor, but yes, I'm sure there is a hereditary factor in there as well to a certain degree. It's something worth noting as well. Very powerful energy workers, kids, tend to have a propensity towards this kind of condition. There's many internal arts teachers who are pretty good, who have kids who suffer with mental illnesses of some sort or psychiatric disturbance of some sort. That's quite normal, simply because something is not passed on genetically, I think, so much as just that information in, processed through the body while the child is developing is more likely to have that kind of condition, that's for sure. So I often advise women who I know who are energy workers, well, you know, actually, once they become pregnant, I say don't do anything to do with energy work, right? Walk, breathe, stretch, eat shit for 9 months. No, don't do that. You'll affect the baby's health. But I don't know, just look after yourself and be comfortable. But I don't advise doing internal work. during pregnancy, because you can influence the energetic development of the fetus, ultimately, of the child within the womb. And you can alter it in ways that we don't know, we're not too sure about. So one of the risks is that there is the potential for this kind of condition developing. A child's more likely to struggle with its kind of psychological health. So it's 9 months off for women. 9 months off. Well, not off. Bloody hell. I mean, it's tiring enough, isn't it? You've got something else to do for 9 months. I shouldn't say 9 months off. That's such a male thing to say, isn't it? 9 months off of your particular internal practice. You're doing your own internal practice with the child. Jackson, would this be one of the things we see in people who practice Qigong and use recreational drugs and psychedelics? Yes. Yes, it is. Or is that a whole other can of worms? No, it's not a whole. It's the same thing. Sorry, I forgot psychedelics. I can't even say it. I forgot psychedelics yesterday, didn't I? And Pat had to remind me, I think. Yeah, yes. Energy work plus psychedelics equals problems. Risky. Yeah, so be careful with it. When I have students who want to go off and do ayahuasca, which I personally think is a waste of time. If you're after it for something therapeutic, fair enough. I think that's cool. I think plant medicine can help people medically with all kinds of things. Or maybe it can be mind opening. But with regards to the actual spiritual cultivation, I don't think it serves any purpose whatsoever. It's quite separate from it. And that's someone that's taken quite a lot of substances at different times. But at the same time, I don't advise people against it. They want to do it. But I do advise them against combining the two. I say take a good few months off, 2, 3 months, 4 months off of your practice before you go do the plant medicine to prepare for it. I don't think a combination of the two is good. Plant medicine is strong, energy work is strong. Maybe we don't want them both at the same time. Maybe we want to do them one at a time, but maybe I'm just being overly cautious. Who knows? Adrian, so just want to clarify, plant medicine useful for medicine. Plant medicine, spiritual development, not useful. Plant medicine, psychologically open, helpful. Spiritual development, not quite the same. Yeah, it's not the same thing. Adrian, is it possible to learn how to discern between the energies of real deities versus our imagination? Yes. But you don't ask me how, so I don't have to answer. Gets me off the hook. Yes, you can. NVM. NVM. What does that mean? NVM. No. I'm not very good with these shorthand things people use. Never mind. I see. Right. Okay. Thanks. Someone's written there. Yeah, I have no idea what any of these mean. So many people send us messages with these shorthands. I don't know what any of them mean. I just about figured LOL. After listening to your explanation of psychics and channels, all good. TLDR. Don't worry about deities. He's lost me. Sorry, Adrian. It's TLDR. Philip, how does the training affect children after they're born? I guess you should not train in the same room as them. Better not. Actually, with regards to TLDR, too long, don't read. Oh, okay, thank you. In summary. Now I know. Philip, how does the training affect children after they're born? I guess you should not train in the same room. With regards to once they're born, mostly it's the purging I'm worried about, actually. Mostly it's when people are purging. I don't normally advise people to do practices that are clearing out in the space that a child is in, because they're like sponges. They're big sponges for everything that's going on. Other than that, I don't think, actually I'm not so worried if it's so much of an issue. If people want to do practices like seated work or breath work or even Tai Chi or something, is fine. I just don't think adults should purge Dao Yin-wise into a room where the child is. I don't think that's good, because they'll just gather it up in that skull cavity and then hate you for it later. Unless you hate your child, in which case go for it. Patrick, I've recently stumbled upon a forum, wow, there's your first problem, where they called themselves tulpas. Okay. They all thought that at least one alternate personality is living inside of them. Really? That's interesting. Seem kind of proud of it too. And the alternate personalities would also write on the forum. Really? This sounds like a mad group. I've recently stumbled upon a forum where they call themselves tulpas. They all thought that they had at least one alternate personality that sometimes writes on the forum. I think there's a whole mess of issues there, isn't there? It's not the Internal Arts Academy forum, is it? If that's what it is, I'm a bit concerned now. Okay, yeah. I would say they might want to revisit what's going on. That would be my suggestion, but maybe I just don't understand what they're doing. Aidan, how would a medical practitioner discern whether their patient has walking fire or an actual possession? Yeah, okay, fair question. An actual possession is saved for next weekend. Take that, Aidan. Yeah, I'm going to save that for next weekend because I will talk about possessions, and I think if I answer that, that's going to be a long answer. So sorry about that, Aidan, but yeah, I think I should do that next time. And now I've turned off the questions. There we go. Yeah, I'll do that next week. When I talk about possessions with you, I'll talk about the ghost realm, demons and possessions and what they actually are and things like that a little bit. And I'll talk about the differences between them. But you can almost assume that the majority of people coming in actually have walking fire, entering demons, to be perfectly honest. Yeah. You know a possession when you see it. You need to get the holy water and the cross. Okay, so walking fire, entering demons. Anything else I need to mention around that? What do we have? We have the causative factors, the results of it. No, I think that's okay. Do remember that, Florian, have you ever seen a real possession? Yes, I have. I have actually. I've seen several mistaken ones. I've seen, as in people thought it was possession, lots of those. I have seen one deliberate possession. One school that deliberately caused possession on purpose. And then I have seen and treated real possessions, yeah. Then I've seen things that that people thought were possessions, but they weren't, definitely, in rituals and things. Bernard, more real life war stories, please. No, my life's boring. You don't want to know those, Bernard. I'll just explain the explain the mechanics behind it. Yes, so when I'm talking about these systems that have religious kind of ideas mixed with energy work, I'm not saying that all systems, I should clarify that have kind of a religious background and energy work combined are bad. I'm not saying that. Don't make that mistake. I'm definitely not. I'm simply saying that they are more risky. Okay, they are more prone to that because you can kind of see, right, the nature of those two combined, why that might be more likely. I don't think that's that hard to see. But it's still quite rare for those things develop in those systems anyway. Yeah, but they are just more likely, more than a grounded system. Think about it. You're more likely to get someone, I know it's a bit of a weird example, but you're more likely to get someone with walking fire, entering demons in kind of, I don't know, esoteric, energetic, Tibetan lineage from the middle of nowhere combined to Tai Chi. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's going to be a difference, right? We can see that one is more likely to develop than the other because there are more risk-causing factors within those systems. That's all it is. But I never want you to think I'm saying don't do those, because I know what it's like. I've spoken to people and then they've gone away and said, all religious energetic systems are bad, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying there's more of a tendency towards risk within those particular systems. Yeah, more likely for it to happen. So people who are teaching those systems or involved in those systems, in my opinion, need a very good eye for spotting for when somebody is at risk. Yeah, for when somebody's at risk to deal with it. Oh yeah, one last person before we do some practice that is at risk. Obsessive people. I forgot that. Obsessive people. Obsessive people, well, that's me, isn't it? I'm in that category. I think I define that category possibly. But obsessive people, that sort of the ones that come into your school, if you teach something like this, who are just totally obsessed, they've got to do 42 hours a day from day one when they first come in. Those students are very appealing in many ways, aren't they? Because you're like, oh great, you've got someone who wants to do that. But those are the ones that are at risk as well, of course, because I think obsession is a mental illness, but I don't necessarily think it's a negative mental illness, or I hope not, because I definitely suffer with it for sure. And I almost think a degree of obsession is needed to kind of master something, whether it be the guitar, whether it be playing the spoons, whether it be alchemy, it doesn't matter. There has to be a degree of obsession anyway to really kind of go to the deepest ends of it. But if you have that tendency, you're going to be more at risk. Yeah. So whenever I get a student come in who, you show them whatever, Wuji, right, for example. You show them Wuji and you say, yeah, go, we do 20 minutes. And they come back, I've done 9 hours a day for the last 4 months since I last saw you. I'm already, my alarm bells are going, oh my God, here we go. problems, and you have to just kind of communicate with them a little bit. Just kind of keep an eye, because they might be okay, but they might not. They might have that tendency to just kind of unlock something. And from my experience, like I said, they can be quite problematic because they will latch onto these problems when they arise, and they will defend them. And if you try to do anything to take them out of that psychologically difficult state, they won't like it, because they'll kind of attribute this state they're in as something that's positive, rather than something was happening to you a little bit quick for you to handle. So if you are a teacher, just be aware of those people as well. Although they do make very good students, if you can get them past the past the walk-in fire, they make good students. I think it's like 90% of Lotus and Qigong, isn't it? Pretty much. It's quite an obsessive school, the ones that I meet. And that's it, no more questions. Okay, great. So, yes, let's do this. Oh, you want your phone, sorry. Kidnapped your phone, didn't I? Let me just change. Yep, cool. Is that clear enough? Can you see the distinction, how they're different conditions? See Qi rising as opposed to poison fire affecting the heart, or walking fire entering demons. See, they're quite different, right? The causative factors involved, the chain that unfolds, the results, they're specific conditions, So, seated. Lightly close the eyes. Allow your body to breathe in and out through the nose. Again, whatever you want with your hands. We're just chilling. Lap, knees. Yeah, it's fine. Just let them rest. If you've got tiny stubby arms, just let them float up here. That's all right, wherever you want them. And then just allow the breath to settle just for a couple of minutes. I'll turn this before I lead you into another practice. So as before, we begin this practice with the sealing, yeah? So we'll just quickly go through the sealing practice a little faster, and then there's a second part to it that is a little different. And the second part is designed to evacuate heat from the body, ultimately, to clear that heat. So, first of all, just switch to reverse breathing. Not for too long. Just closing that cavity on the inhalation, letting it open on the exhalation. And then as before, bring the mind to the surface of the skin. And then we'll move a little quicker, just so we can move on to the next part. So just go straight into the surface of the body, shape of the form. And then when your mind is settled there, just move on to connecting it to the inhalation. So as I breathe in, I, what's the word? Shrink wrap, sorry. I shrink wrap the body as I inhale. And then I breathe out and I let it relax. So we're just starting with the sealing the leakages, just to rebalance the system really as much as anything. Just for a few minutes. Okay, so there's various ways to clear heat from the system in the alchemy practice. Some are simple, some are complex. I'll do the simple one first, a simple hand shape, okay, which essentially is what I'm doing. So I'm going to form two fists with the little finger extended, like so, yeah. And then what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to interlock the little fingers, like so. Doesn't matter which way round, doesn't make any difference. I'm going to apply a little stretch on the little finger and just rest it on the lap. It doesn't have to be neat, so my hands aren't level, but they're pulling. They're like two hooks. Not huge, just a tiny little pull, just a little. So I feel it pull. I just feel it kind of start to stretch up into the body. So I'm almost relaxing my hands, and kind of the weight of the hands is doing the pull for me. You can add a tiny little bit if you want though, yeah. But what I mean is I'm not in a tug of war. If I'm switched off and they're resting, nothing. If I just pull a little, I feel it just open up, actually up underneath the armpit. Around here it starts to pull a tiny bit. So I have that, little fingers interlocked. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to breathe in through the nose. And then really simply, we'll do the easy one first, and then maybe this evening we'll do I'll try to fit in the more complex version, yeah? So I breathe in through the nose, and then I just breathe out through the mouth. Slow exhalation. Okay, what we normally don't like to do very much in Qigong. So I breathe in through the nose, breathe out through the mouth. Just letting the exhalation extend a little bit longer. Breathe in, out. Just a few more. Then just release the hands. You want the palms open now, just either on the knees or resting on the lap, but palms up, not down, up. And then just breathe normally in and out through the nose. I don't stretch my palms, I just relax them. And some deep breaths in and out. Start to move the body around. And turn your head side to side. Okay, there. Pets. Kidneys. Eyes. Good. And I'll carry on looking at this in the next class, actually. I'll carry on looking at more intricate things with regards to heat. Is there any more questions, Ronnie, before I finish? Let's have a look. Oh, is it? Oh, sorry, I can do it on the laptop if you'd rather.
No, that's just.
Oh, okay, cool. Can you hit gallery view for me? Thank you. Cheryl says, or asks, maintaining reverse breathing in second part when breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth. No, it doesn't matter actually. Just regular breathing is fine. Just breathe. Stephen says, thank you so much. If we still can't do any internal work other than very briefly and very gently, softening Tian 2, is it best to stick with stretching, physical activity, and the exercise from the first 2 sessions, as well as the Qi Deviation video from the library? Yes, that would be your best bet for sure. Oh, visitors. That would be your best bet for sure. Yeah, and then if you're trying to move gradually into internal work, try to build up towards the things that are here, that we've done within these 2 sessions as well. And then obviously the anchor and the breath is what you want to move to after that. And then Evelyn says, I did not quite catch you earlier. Is the shrink wrapping strengthen or weaken the Wei Qi? It does neither. The reason I was talking about the Wei Qi was because sometimes it just pulls it in a little bit as a byproduct of what you're doing, only temporarily. So the result is your body temperature on some people will drop, but not on other people. Some people, but not other people. The shrink wrapping is just to harmonize and to balance by taking away the leakages. I feel actually, not on this course because I need to stick on the subject with Qi deviation, but I think maybe I should explain leakages a little bit more sometime. Maybe that's just a video I could record sometime because it is a little bit complex what they mean. But yeah, it's not got much to do with the weakening the Wei Qi, so don't worry about that. Yeah, that wouldn't be good. You'd all get sick, wouldn't you? Don't worry about that. Stephanie Chow, does this release heat in the digestive system as well? Yes, in actual fact, that's the main place that it takes it out of. It takes it out of the central point. So the heat from the body is processed mostly via the stomach rather than the spleen, actually, that it takes it out of. So yes, that will help with that. Stephanie wants to know if she can eat fried chicken and do this exercise then. Is fried chicken a problem you have? Oh, she's disappeared. She was on the screen before. She's gone. Fried chicken. I guess it depends how much fried chicken you have, really. I suppose as much as anything, a little bit of fried chicken. But if you're eating sort of 32 buckets a day, it might be a little bit too much. Yeah. Along with potato chips. But yeah, sounds all right to me. Why not? Anne says, thank you. You're welcome, no problem. Would you talk a bit about, some of you have faces that pop up in here, and some of you don't. Is that something you've set, is it? That's quite nice, I get to see what you look like. Thank you. Would you talk a bit about Kundalini as well at some point? Yes, I will talk about Kundalini in the next session. That was my plan. I will talk about the Kundalini, yeah. I have met much talking about that lately. Yeah, there's a lot of talk about that, isn't it? Yeah, I'll talk about the Kundalini in the next class, actually. I'll do that next, along with Shakti and Bindu and a few other things, and try to explain some of these concepts a little bit. So yeah, I will do. Okay, right then guys, I'm going to go get some food. So I'll take any other questions that pop up in the next one, re-ask them in the next session. Is that clear? Did that help? Do you think you understand that condition okay? Yeah, okay, cool. I think, I think certainly Qigong teachers, it's useful to know, isn't it? Or internal arts practitioners, it's useful to know. And like I said, I think they also do give you insight into just some of the mechanisms contained within as well. And as much as anything, I want you to see they're different conditions. They're not the same, all these different Qi deviations. All right, I'll see you soon. I'm going to eat some food and I'll be back for Kundalini. We're not going to awaken it, don't worry. We're not going to awaken the Kundalini. That would be impressive via Zoom, wouldn't it? But I'm not quite at that level.